I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey Lurkers, welcome to this week's episode. I apologize for the last minute scheduling change, but I had the opportunity to have some downtime and I took it. While I was away, I actually read an entire book for fun and not for research. So last episode, which was episode 102, was part 1 of Crater Lake. This week is the continuation of the mysteries at Crater Lake in Oregon. Last time we talked about some of the strange things surrounding the lake, like the Native American myths, UFOs, strange creatures, and ghostly campers and campfires. So make sure you go back and listen to that episode. Like I said, that was episode 102. This week we're going to be taking a look at not one, but 2 missing 411 cases from Crater Lake National Park. We're going to do this a little differently than usual. Normally I would go chronologically, but I think I'm going to switch it up a little bit. So the first case that we're going to look at is the disappearance of Samuel Savage Becker Boehlke, or just Sammie Boehlke. Sammie was 8 years old and had a mild form of autism and sensory integration disorder. Basically, Sammie did not like loud noises or bright lights. He would cover his ears and hide when there were loud noises. On October 14, 2006, Sammie and his dad were out for a day of hiking. They were staying with family at nearby Diamond Lake Resort and traveled to Crater Lake National Park for some hiking, tag, and hide and seek. Sammie's father, Ken, parked along Rim Drive, overlooking the lake near Cleetwood Cove trailhead. It was growing dark, and Sammie's dad called for Sammie to get in the car to head back. His dad, Ken, walked the short distance to the car so they could return to the cabin. Sammie yelled out that he wanted to check out something he saw. He had seen something yellow, and he thought it might be gold, so he ran up the ridge away from the direction of the lake. Ken chased after Sammie, but he couldn't keep up and lost sight of him. His dad called for Sammie and looked for him for a couple of hours, and finally he flagged down a passing car to get help. That evening, the search started. At the time of Sammie's disappearance, there was about 6 to 8 inches of snow on the ground. Sammie was dressed for the weather for the most part. He was wearing a winter coat, long-sleeve shirt, cargo pants, and shoes. During the search, 200 people searched a 6-mile square area, or about 4,000 acres. Because he was on the autism spectrum and had issue with loud noises, the searchers were instructed not to use whistles or loud yelling for fear it would cause Sammie to hide. Cave climbers searched lava tubes, and 2 helicopters were used, which included a National Guard copter with infrared and an observation helicopter. One of the helicopters did spot some tracks, but they turned out to be tracks made by local wildlife. Experts did not believe that Sammie fell into the lake. There were too many obstacles in the way to stop his fall, and he was last seen running away from the lake area. Scent dogs did get occasional hits, but nothing that led them to Sammie or any other clues. The Rogue River Hotshot Elite Firefighting Team joined the search, and they concentrated in areas of rough terrain. They also conducted intense grid searches, but turned up nothing. Monday brought more snow. Searchers combed the area with dogs and on horseback, but found no sign of Sammie at all. On October 20th, the search was scaled back to just 35 people, before completely stopping altogether. There were remains found at one point, but they ended up belonging to a hiker who went missing in 1991. Something really bothers me about this disappearance. I don't understand the concept of, hey, let's drive around, pull over here, and play hide and seek with a child who is autistic in a wilderness setting. I wouldn't even do that with my grandkids, neither of whom are autistic. as a parent and a grandparent, playing hide and seek in that situation is definitely not going to happen. At least not with me as a knowing and willing participant. Even just camping at a campsite in a campground, I wouldn't be okay with that, as far as playing hide and seek. It's stressful enough keeping track of children without encouraging them to go make themselves unfindable. I also wonder, why do you spend hours looking for your kid before flagging down help? You're in a remote area. Flag down help. Continue looking for your kid. Right away. Don't wait. There's snow on the ground. It's cold. He doesn't have hiking boots. Anyway, there's been no sign of Sammie at all since that time. And that's going to bring us to the second disappearance at Crater Lake. And this one is even weirder in my opinion, which is why I saved it for last, because, weirdest last or whatever. Charles McCullar was a 19-year-old amateur photographer and experienced outdoorsman from Virginia who wanted to visit all of the national parks. While staying with friends in Eugene, Oregon, he made plans to travel to Crater Lake National Park. He told his friends he was heading out and would return January 31st, 1975. He specifically said if he wasn't home by February 1st, to call the authorities to look for him. He was last seen January 30th, 1975. He was not seen alive after that. I want to point out that he was pretty responsible, making sure he told people where he was going and his expected return date. More people need to do that, but should also include specific areas they are going to, because that's one thing he didn't do. He said Crater Lake, but there are several trailheads within the Crater Lake, so being specific would have been best. Since he didn't return on February 1st, as he said, his friends reported him missing. Park rangers at Crater Lake posted flyers with Charles's information around the park area, and a search was started. At the time of his disappearance, there was about 100 inches of snow on the ground, which is almost 8.5 feet of snow. There was one report that a logger gave Chris a ride and dropped him off at the park entrance. Charles McCullar's family was not alerted to his disappearance until February 10th, at which time his father began becoming involved in the search. But a search yielded no sign of Charles McCullar. Then, October 18, 1976, a group of hikers hiking in a desolate area of Crater Lake National Park came across badly weathered gear. They marked the area by tying something to a tree, then took the pack to the ranger station. When the rangers began searching through the pack, they came across an odd-looking key. One of the rangers remembered information on Charles McCullar's missing flyer about the oddly shaped Volkswagen key that he had. Rangers returned to the area the hikers had marked and found human remains that were identified as belonging to Charles McCullar. Of course, there's more to the story. First is the location of McCullar's body. He was discovered 200 to 300 yards from the crest of a hill by Bybee Creek. The pack, skeletal remains, and clothing were found with the body. No skis or snowshoes were found in the area. Chief Park Ranger Don Shawley said that without skis or snowshoes, it would not have been possible for McCullar to get to the area where he was found. Remember, there was 100 inches of snow on the ground, and there were snowdrifts that were 20 feet high. A 20-foot snowdrift is the height of a 2-story house. The remains that were found included a skull, lower jawbone, and some small bones. One of the rangers who discovered the remains said it was the strangest thing he had ever seen. The jeans were pulled in such a way that it looked like McCullar had simply melted away while sitting on a log. The jeans were pulled around the ankles and were unbuttoned and unzipped. While inspecting the jeans, the ranger also found in one of the pant legs a shin bone broken with blood on each end. Under the pants were the socks, and inside those were the bones from McCullar's feet. No shoes or boots were located. Animals had not touched the shin bones or the bones in the socks. which is weird that animals wouldn't attempt to get at those decomposing parts in the jeans and socks. In the end, Charles McCullar's death was ruled to be from natural causes. Oh, did I mention no one found his camera equipment either? Remember, he was there specifically to take landscape photos of the national park. If you think this is all suspect, you aren't alone. In some FOIA request documents, Charles McCullar's father also questioned the investigation early on, going as far as to request assistance from his senator. Here's the letter to Mr. Byrd. Dear Mr. Byrd, I would like to enlist your service in helping me to obtain federal assistance in my continuing search to ascertain what happened to my son, Charles W. McCullar, who has been missing in Oregon since the 30th of January 1975. When Charles was initially reported as a missing person to all law enforcement agencies in Eugene, Oregon, on the 1st of February 1975, the Oregon State Police, assisted by other agencies and groups, initiated an investigation which to date has revealed no information which would indicate what has happened to Charles. The Federal Bureau of Investigation on 2 occasions has indicated that it has no authority to enter cases of missing persons. You can imagine my surprise while in Oregon searching for clues to my son's disappearance, I picked up a newspaper and read that the FBI, as well as other federal agencies, were engaged in a search for a missing person, James Hoffa. My first reaction to this situation was a feeling of indignation. However, after returning home to Virginia and giving much thought to the situation, the indignation turned to determination when I decided that the McCullar family would pursue all avenue available to receive the same magnitude of federal assistance as was afforded the Hoffa family. Realizing, of course, that I do not have the knowledge of federal statutes or intra-workings of the federal government, I decided to ask our elected officials to help in this serious matter. I am enclosing a brief summary of the activities that have transpired to this matter, so you will be aware of the situation at this date. Your expeditious cooperation in this matter is appreciated. Sincerely, Mr. McCullar. They actually have that redacted. It's from Charles's father. It continues, on 29 January 1975, Charles W. McCullar left the apartment of blank, a friend in Eugene, Oregon, to take a bus/hiking trip to Crater Lake National Park to take photographs of the lake and surrounding area. He planned to return to Eugene on the 31st January 1975. When he had not returned by the 1st of February 1975, blank notified all law enforcement agencies in Eugene that he was missing. The Oregon State Police notified the news media and posted photos in bus stations to south of Eugene. On 10 February 1975, blank notified us. I arrived in Klamath Falls, Oregon on the 11th February 1975 to correlate all personal information and to get all information possible. The original thought of the state police was that Charles changed his itinerary without notifying anyone. Knowing that Charles was a responsible young man who had stayed in contact with us during his trip through Texas, Arizona, and Oregon, we immediately rejected this idea. The prevalent theory by all was that Charles was a victim of the heavy snows and cold weather. Although doubtful of this because he had knowledge of snow survival techniques and his equipment was very good, we had no evidence to the contrary. Crater Lake officials arranged to fly the lake and road areas surrounding the lake. State police flew from Roseburg to Diamond Lake, and I flew all of these areas myself. I traveled to various places leaving pictures and interviewed various persons who had seen hikers and picked up hikers, but discarded all these leads except for 2 persons who had seen a hiker on the road from Roseburg on 29 January, but could not make positive identification. At that time, results were negative, so I decided to return home, leaving further investigation in the hands of the state police, to wait for the snow to melt so I could return and make a more thorough search. Subsequent to my leaving, the state police interviewed a logger who had given a young man, whose description fits, a ride to within 20 miles of Crater Lake Entrance Road on the morning of 30 January 1975. During the ensuing 5 months, we mailed circulars with photographs to approximately 86 persons who were registered at Diamond Lake Lodge, a year-round resort which is located on the route from Roseburg to Crater Lake. No leads were produced from these. The police interviewed numerous persons who, as a result of the media coverage, called to state they had seen or given a ride to hikers. The Cascade Rescue Emergency Service teams searched the area extensively by snowmobile, and the Crater Lake staff, on more than one occasion, searched the lake area by skis, snowmobile, flying, and hiking. None of these searches produced any positive results. In July 1975, I returned to Oregon where I hiked, flew, and drove over the area for over 3 weeks without any positive results. After returning home and reviewing the information contained in the police reports that we possess, plus maps of the areas searched and the intensity of these searches without finding any signs of equipment, we concluded that Charles was not the victim of foul weather, but rather a victim of foul play. We have relayed our feelings to the Superintendent of the Oregon State Police. However, as of this date, the only action that has been taken, that we are aware of, is that the state police have again turned to the media for assistance. Although we are deeply appreciative of all these efforts, it is hard for us to think that a person or persons involved in a crime would turn themselves over to the police. This is why we believe a more thorough investigation is needed. So that was the letter to Senator Byrd. This was Senator Byrd's memo that he sent to the FBI, and he asked 3 questions. It says, please comment upon 1. The policy or policies allowing the FBI to become involved in the Hoffa case. 2. In light of the answer to item number 1, the policy or policies which have prevented the FBI from assisting in the investigation of the disappearance of Charles W. McCullar. And 3. Since the boy's disappearance may have taken place on federal property, could this make a difference in the Bureau's involvement? And of course, the FBI wrote back, this is the FBI's return. This is the letter written to Senator Byrd from the FBI. Dear Senator Byrd, your communication of March 22, 1976, enclosing a letter from your constituent, Mr. McCullar, regarding the disappearance of his son, Charles McCullar, has been received and reviewed. I am in sympathy with Mr. McCullar as I am with all parents who find themselves in similar situations, and, judging by the number of communications we receive, there are a great many. In order to respond to your specific points of inquiry, allow me to set forth the following factors which pertain to this type of complaint. First, in regard to Mr. James R. Hoffa's disappearance, we are conducting investigation in this case under the federal extortion statute pursuant to threats made after the disappearance of Mr. Hoffa. As I am sure you are aware, the FBI has no statutory basis under which missing persons investigations can be conducted. We do accept information pertaining to these individuals and place a missing persons notice in our identification division. To date, no such data has been received pertaining to Charles W. McCullar. In fact, a review of our indices at FBI headquarters and at FBI, Portland, Oregon, has been totally negative in this regard. Incidentally, your constituent's letter does not include descriptive data which would allow such a missing persons notice to be placed. We will be pleased to place this notice if necessary descriptive information is received. In the absence of evidence of a specific federal violation over which the FBI has jurisdiction, we are precluded from initiating an investigation. There appears to be no such evidence in this case. I hope the above will be of assistance to you in answering your constituent. Your enclosures are returned to you herewith. And that was from Clarence M. Kelly, Director. Also, there's a note added to the bottom of this. It says, this is to reply to an inquiry from Senator Byrd's office regarding the disappearance of Charles W. McCullar in Oregon in January of 1975. No record in Bureau indices, Missing Persons Unit, Identification Division, advises no record to date. ASAC something Portland advises no record in their indices and further notes Crater Lake area of Oregon is haven for hippie types who reside in numerous communes in that area. So I'm not really sure if they are referring to Charles as the hippie and insinuating that he's a hippie who joined a commune and is no longer communicating with his family, or that hippies and communes did something with Charles. I don't really know. Then Charles McCullar's father questioned the natural causes conclusion. This was written to the FBI. Dear Sir, during these past many weeks since the discovery of Charles McCullar's remains, I have been puzzled and concerned because of the discrepancies between what was found and the conclusions that were apparently reached. The attached explains the reasons for my concern. I realize that none of this constitutes evidence, but it seems to me there are enough unanswered questions to warrant a suspicion that there might have been foul play involved in his disappearance and death. I hope that this case remains open and not filed away and forgotten. I may never learn what really happened out there, but I believe someone was responsible. It seems to me there is justification for, at the very least, classifying this as an unsolved case. I would appreciate receiving your evaluation of this matter. Sincerely, Mr. McCullar. And these are the things that he indicated were his reasons for feeling that there were a reason to keep the case open. On January 29, 1975, at about 1:30 p.m., Charles W. McCullar left the apartment of a friend in Eugene to take a bus/hiking trip to Crater Lake National Park. He planned to return by January 31, 1975. When he had not returned on February 1st, the friend reported him missing to the Oregon State Police. The friend did not notify Mr. McCullar until February 10th. Nothing substantial was done by the police for 2 weeks following notification of the disappearance. By that time, the Greyhound travel tickets that would have told his route had been destroyed. Eventually, it was determined that he was at Dry Creek Store on Route 138 at 6:30 p.m. on the same day he left the apartment. He could have taken a bus scheduled to arrive in Roseburg at 3:51 p.m. 2.5 hours after arrival in Roseburg, he was at Dry Creek Store, with a rip in his jacket, about 50 miles from Roseburg. There has never been any explanation of how he traveled that 50 miles. Having left the bus route at Roseburg, he was on foot. None of the people who live in the area gave him a lift. This would indicate that whoever gave him a ride was going further up the road, the direction he was going. So why would he get out? He was last seen on the following morning, January 30th, 1975. He was given a ride as far as Stump Lake, about 15 miles west of Diamond Lake. The state of Oregon took the position that it was inappropriate and unwarranted to interview persons known to be at and going to and from Diamond Lake to try to gather information. Diamond Lake was the only place open at the time of year between Stump Lake and Crater Lake Park. The location of remains. Prior to discovery of his remains, Crater Lake Park rangers more than once expressed the opinion that without skis or snowshoes, he would be unable to travel into the park more than a mile or two, at the most, before becoming exhausted. There was approximately 90 inches of snow on the ground at the time of his disappearance, according to the official records of Crater Lake. The rangers gave no consideration to searching anywhere in the west side of the park because of their belief that it would be impossible for him to have penetrated very far into the park. Yet, his remains were found many miles from the closed north entrance and several miles from the nearest road. Even after his remains had been found, the rangers remained puzzled as to how he could have gotten to that location without equipment for travel in the snow. Considering his known intentions, it seems improbable he would have gone near that creek bottom had it been possible. Condition and circumstances of effects found at scene. There were clothes in his pack. This clothing was in good condition, except for holes of the type that would have been made by mice or similar small animals. This clothing had been protected from the weather because deterioration was minimal. The sleeping bag had no rips such as would be made by claws of a wild animal. Again, the only holes were the type that would be made by small gnawing animals. The zipper of the bag was in the open, zipped-down position. It was found partly in the creek. A foam rubber pad was rolled up and tied. Very careful examination of the soggy, badly deteriorated blue jean remains that were found lying on the bank of the creek revealed not a coin or scrap of anything else in the pockets. There were two zippers practically on top of one another in the closed, zipped-up position. No coins or any other metal objects were reported found at the scene. There were scraps of red fabric and red buttons and underwear scraps scattered about. Many items known to be in his possession were not found. Metal mess kit, 2 knives, aluminum pack rack, camera with leather strap, canisters of film, red waterproof sleeping bag cover, sheet of plastic. There was no trace of any outerwear, that is, jacket, ski cap, boots. No billfold or traveler's check folder. Empty food containers were found at the scene. He usually adhered to the hiker's credo, don't leave anything except your footprints. It would be typical of him to place empty food containers in his pack after eating. That last meal could have been eaten elsewhere. He did not fall into the creek. Had he gotten wet, he would have removed the clothes from the pack, looking for something dry to put on. There were no animal attacks during the nighttime camping. His body lay within inches of the creek, clad in underwear, 2 pairs of blue jeans and red shirt, but nothing else. Perhaps socks, but not boots. Everything had been removed from his pockets prior to his body coming to rest on the creek bank. If something as light as the rolled-up foam rubber pad hadn't washed away, it is unlikely everything else would have done so. His belt remained in his pack, unmarked and unchewed. If animals dragged away the missing items for their leather content, why not the belt? If unknown persons happened onto the site prior to the hikers in October 1976 and took away the missing items, wouldn't they dump the contents of the pack, especially while removing the pack rack? Soggy boots and down-filled jacket would be totally useless items to anyone, and heavy to carry. And of course, the FBI wrote a letter back. Dear Mr. McCullar, thank you for your letter of March 22, 1977 to Special Agent so-and-so of this office. Being a parent myself, I certainly understand your desire that the facts regarding the disappearance of Charles be determined. The loss of your son is truly a tragic experience, and you certainly have our sympathy. I am sure that you can understand that in any mysterious disappearance case in which the victim's remains are not discovered until almost 2 years later, that there will always be unresolved questions. The questions that you asked in your letter are valid. We have considered the same questions. However, we must also consider the fact that no evidence of foul play was found, according to the experts who examined the scene. Additionally, it must be remembered that persons suffering from hypothermia do not act as rational people would. This could explain some of the questions regarding location, missing items, and clothing in the pack. Furthermore, it seems unlikely that had Charles been abducted, he would have been taken to such a remote spot, since the abductors would also have had the problem of getting out. I assure you that this case will not be filed away and forgotten. The FBI will always be alert to any additional clues as to the cause of Charles's death. Any leads coming to our attention in this matter will be thoroughly investigated. If at any time you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, John G. Devine. And then Charles's father wrote his own rebuttal. I really love Charles McCullar's father, by the way. I really think he's a kick-ass kind of person. Dear Mr. Devine, thank you for your letter of April 1st, 1977, in response to my communication regarding the loss of my son, Charles W. McCullar, whose remains were found at Crater Lake National Park. I apologize for the delay in acknowledging your communication. However, I wanted to do some research on the effects of hypothermia, as well as reevaluate the situation from the maps and notes which I had made on my 3 trips to the area. This letter is not intended to be repetitious of prior communication, nor is it intended to be critical of anyone, but only to further state some of my beliefs and opinions. We are quite cognizant of the fact that there may be questions in this case which may remain unresolved. To be as frank with you as we have been with the state officials of Oregon, it has been and still is our opinion that no positive attempts have been made to resolve any questions in this matter, with the exception of attempting to determine if Charles did in fact go to Crater Lake area and did he come out of the area. As we all know, these two questions were resolved in October 1976. In considering location, I recently conferred with, I believe, Dan Shawley, National Park Service, who was Chief Ranger at Crater Lake in January 1975. And he is of the opinion that for Charles to have entered the lake area through the north entrance, his intended route, and proceeded to where his remains were found would have been an impossibility. The Rangers' calculations also were that with a 90-inch snow depth at the ranger station, the western slope where the remains were found would have been between 60 to 80 inches of snow, since most of the snow comes from the western side. He was the opinion that to travel approximately 8 miles in that snow depth would have been improbable without snowshoes or skis, and Charles had neither. When the Crater Lake Rangers went to check the scene, they found clothes scattered in a 3-foot square area. This does not reflect the true status of the items when originally discovered. When communicating with one of the hikers who discovered the pack, he stated that some socks, a shirt, and a pair of blue jeans and a ring of keys were within a foot of the pack. The remainder of the clothes were inside the pack, and the pack was open with broken straps. Undoubtedly, when emptying the pack, they scattered the clothes. They also found 2 cans of chili under the pack, but nothing else except for the items which have been accounted for. I assume they disposed of the chili, since these were not found by the Rangers nor the investigating team. In my research of the effects of hypothermia, I have been in contact with persons who are familiar with this type of situation. It was the consensus of all that a person who was in such a state that they would throw away their jacket, pull off snow shields and boots, and rip the frame of their pack, could not carry the pack, sleeping bag, and rubber pad, since the loss of the use of hands is one, if not the first, effects of hypothermia. Neither could he have crossed the creek nor opened the food cans. When considering the evidence found at the scene by the investigating team, I agree there was no visible evidence of foul play. However, it is the lack of evidence, namely the missing items, which has convinced me that foul play was involved. When considering the items which are missing, it is indicative that Chuck was bedded down for the night. He would have made shelter with a sheet of black plastic, unrolled his sleeping bag, taken his mess kit out of his pack to eat. Before getting into his sleeping bag, he would have removed his jacket, snow shields, boots, bulky items such as knives, wallet, and change. Since it was either snowing or he thought it might snow, he used his waterproof sleeping bag cover to store these items, as well as his camera, film, and slides. I do not believe that these items were ever at the scene where the remains were found. Had this been so, I believe some of the items would have been found. I cannot believe only these items would have washed away with high water, since other items did not get washed away. I believe with additional snows, the camera, after lying there for 4 or 5 months, would have gotten some moisture, which would have caused some corrosion. Had anyone found it and taken it away, it would probably have needed some cleaning or repair. In communicating with Ehrenreich Photo Optical Industries, the manufacturer of the camera and lens, their records indicate that none of these items have been returned to their service centers. Subsequent to the visit to the scene by the investigating team, I, accompanied by an employee of Crater Lake, returned to the area of the scene by driving eastward to the end of Bybee Creek roadway and then hiking eastward toward the scene for approximately 3 miles up Bybee Creek bed and the south side of the ridge. On our return trip, we used the trail on the north side of the ridge. It is my opinion that with deep snow on the ground, it would not have been a problem to go into and out of the area by snowmobile. It is also my opinion that to have placed the body and other items found on the scene would not create much of a problem. The northern slope of the creek is steep and devoid of trees. It is also 2-tiered, and with snow on the ground, any object which started sliding at the top of the slope would go completely across the creek, since the second or lower tier would act the same as if on a ski run. I think this would account for the body having lain so close to the creek. The sleeping bag lying half in the creek, and the impact of landing caused the pack strap to break, thus accounting for only a few items in the pack being on the ground. We appreciate your assurance of a thorough investigation of any leads which might come to your attention. We believe, however, that all identifiable items were disposed of, and with the conclusions assumed by law enforcement agencies, it is highly improbable that any new leads will be forthcoming after a period of 2.5 years. My present plans are to be in Oregon on vacation during the period of... It's blanked out. Sometime during this period, I would like to meet with you, at your convenience, of course, to discuss this situation in detail. And that was the rebuttal letter from Charles McCullar's father. He then learns that in 1978, Charles McCullar's case is closed, and he had to send 2 separate letters requesting information, asking what new information had warranted the closing of the case. He had to send 2 letters because the FBI ignored the first one. They eventually answer by telling his father there's no additional information, but also nothing to indicate foul play. The traveler's checks that McCullar was carrying were never cashed. So somehow, Charles McCullar manages to get to a remote area of the park without boots, they're missing, or skis or snowshoes. He didn't have any of those to use. Then his pants are positioned in a way that makes it look like the man just melted. In the pants, there's a broken shin bone untouched by animals, along with untouched foot bones still in the sock. His camera is also missing, along with the traveler's checks. What the hell happened here? Seriously, what happened? And hypothermia doesn't fit either. Just like his father said. I gotta say is Charles McCullar had one kick-ass father who basically was investigating his son's disappearance and ultimate death more than the agencies were. Which is sad. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this episode. Remember, you can find Lurk on Spotify or any other podcast listening platforms. You can also find Lurk at lurkpodcast.com, where we have links to the social media accounts as well as our Patreon. Consider becoming a loyal lurker for just $5 a month. And until next time, keep lurking.